The savannah was no longer a golden expanse, but a churning, muddy inland sea. For a relentless week, the skies had wept, a biblical deluge transforming familiar pathways into raging, treacherous rivers. Trees stood like skeletal fingers clawing at a bruised arm, their roots battling the relentless erosion. The air thrummed with the ceaseless drum of rain and the roar of floodwaters, a symphony of nature's raw, destructive power. Marooned on a rapidly shrinking island of thorny acacias, a pride of lions huddled together. The stoic male, his mane matted and dark, stood sentinel at the precipice, his gaze sweeping the swirling expanse. Beside him, a watchful mother lioness nudged her two remaining cubs closer, her eyes wide with primal fear, fixed on the hungry water gnawing at their last refuge. Just moments before, a third cub, small and terrified, had lost its footing on the slick, dissolving bank, tumbling into the torrent. It had vanished instantly, sucked into the maw of a massive, rusted culvert, a dark tunnel through the raised embankment designed to channel seasonal runoff, now a roaring maw of liquid death. A battered Ranger truck, its mud-caked tires churning desperately, finally broke through the choked bush. Kalo, the seasoned team leader, wrestled the steering wheel, his face a mask of grim determination as the vehicle struggled through knee-deep sludge. He brought the truck to a lurching halt just meters from the culvert. Jengo, his younger, more impulsive second-in-command, was out before the engine died, his eyes already scanning the swirling water. "Protocol, Jengo," Kalo's voice cut through the wind and rain, edged with a familiar caution. "We observe. Intervention has its edges. We don't interfere with nature's course, especially with predators." His words were a recitation of rules drilled into them, a shield against the chaos of the wild. But Jengo barely heard him. His gaze was already locked on a flicker of tawny fur, a desperate, tiny face momentarily caught in a back eddy, then shifting, compelled to the gaping, hungry mouth of the culvert. He saw the terror in that cub's eyes, the sheer, helpless vulnerability. "It's a life, Kalo," Jengo retorted, his voice tight, raw. "A cub. Protocol can't dictate that. Not now." He felt a searing heat in his chest, a direct defiance of the rigid lines of duty. His eyes narrowed, not just at the water's fury, but at something else. Around the culvert's rusted entrance, an unnatural, shimmering sheen danced on the churning water, an iridescent slick that seemed to pulse with an oily, almost sickly light, completely out of place amidst the muddy deluge. And then he saw them, faded symbols, etched deep into the rusted metal of the culvert itself. They weren't the random marks of corrosion or weather. They were too deliberate, too geometrically precise, hinting at a purpose far beyond mere erosion. The male lion on his shrinking island let out a deep, guttural rumble that vibrated through the sodden earth, a mournful, defiant sound. His amber eyes, unblinking, were fixed on the culvert, on the very spot Jengo was now staring. As if in answer, the cub surfaced again, briefly, a choked cry escaping its tiny lungs, a sound so heart-wrenchingly small against the storm's fury. Then it was pulled under, swallowed by the churning dark. Jengo felt a fire ignite in his gut, overriding all caution, all rational thought. The decision was made before he consciously registered it. "I'm going in," he declared, his voice ringing with unshakable resolve. Kalo, seeing the determined set of Jengo's jaw, the fierce light in his eyes, knew it was futile to argue. He let out a ragged sigh, a grim nod acknowledging the impossible choice. "Themba, Zola," he barked, his voice suddenly sharp with urgency. "Get the line ready, quickly." From their precarious island, the entire pride watched, silent and unblinking. Their fate, inexplicably, was now intertwined with this reckless human who dared to challenge the flood. Jengo felt a cold premonition settle in his stomach, a certainty that this wasn't just about a flood, or a cub, or even a protocol broken. The unnatural sheen, the strange symbols, this was something far more insidious, something human lurking beneath the surface of the natural disaster. The rescue rope felt rough and reassuring as Jengo meticulously tied it around his waist. His hands, though calloused from years in the field, trembled slightly as he tested the knots, his breath clouding in the cold, rain-soaked air. The roar of the water was a physical entity, vibrating in his chest, an omen of the battle ahead. He spared a quick glance at Kalo, Themba, and Zola, their faces grim, already bracing themselves to manage the line. With a deep breath, Jengo stepped into the icy, churning water. The current immediately seized him, tugging at his legs, battling him for control. It was like stepping into a liquid beast, cold and immense. He gripped the long, heavy rescue pole, its canvas sling swaying precariously, and began his perilous, slow advance toward the roaring culvert mouth. Every step was a monumental effort, the mud sucking at his boots, the powerful water threatening to sweep him away. A low, guttural warning rippled through the air, cutting through the din. The mother lion, still perched on her shrinking island, crouched low, her muscles tensed, a raw sound of grief and aggression vibrating from deep within her chest. Her eyes, narrowed to slits of furious gold, were fixed on Jengo, seeing not a rescuer but a threat to her imperiled cub. "Easy, Mama Train," Jengo murmured, his voice soft, almost a whisper against the storm's fury, hoping his intent would somehow transcend the species barrier. "Easy, just trying to help." He kept his focus forward, one eye on the swirling eddies, the other on the culvert. He finally reached the culvert's entrance, the noise inside overwhelming, a deafening echo chamber of rushing water. The cub was barely visible, a tiny drenched bundle of fur, pinned by a tangle of storm-born debris, struggling for its last ragged breaths. Its eyes were wide with terror, reflecting the furious brown water. As Jengo guided the sling, trying to maneuver it beneath the cub, his gloved hand brushed against something unnaturally smooth, cold, and hard. It was embedded deep within the culvert wall, beneath the layers of rusted corrugated metal, distinct and utterly alien. A momentary jolt shot up his arm, accompanied by a strange, faint vibration, a barely perceptible hum against his palm. It was metallic, certainly, but unlike any part of the old, utilitarian culvert pipe he knew. It felt manufactured, precisely formed, hidden beneath the raw, functional infrastructure. The fleeting touch, the faint tremor, sent a shiver of unease down his spine. Pushing the bizarre discovery aside for a split second, Jengo refocused on the cub. With a final desperate push, he secured the tiny creature, its fragile weight settling into the canvas sling. Just as he felt the cub safely nestled, a powerful surge of water, stronger than any before, ripped through the culvert form, threatening to tear the pole from his grasp. He braced himself, muscles screaming, his knuckles white. "Now!" Jengo yelled, the single word hoarse and desperate, a signal to his team. Kalo, Themba, and Zola responded instantly, straining on the rope, their feet digging into the slick earth. The truck's winch groaned under the immense pressure, a high-pitched whine that cut through the storm. Slowly, mechanically, agonizingly, Jengo and the cub began to rise from the raging water, pulled backward by the sheer force of the winch. The mother lion, her eyes still locked on them, fell silent. Her guttural calls ceased, replaced by an unnerving stillness, an almost eerie cessation of her primal outrage. As he was dragged clear, his boots squishing in the mud, Jengo's mind raced, trying to process the strange casing. The faint vibration, something manufactured, not natural, hidden in the very heart of the culvert. What was it? Why was it there? Who put it there? He quickly glanced at Kalo, a question, an unspoken plea for understanding in his eyes. But Kalo's face was unreadable, etched with the strain of the rescue, focused solely on the immediate task, utterly unaware of the strange anomaly Jengo had just encountered. Jengo, soaked to the bone and shivering, carefully walked backward from the raging water, the shivering cub still cradled in the canvas sling. Its tiny body was a fragile weight against his chest, a testament to the life he'd just plucked from the jaws of the flood. He reached the muddy bank and gently lowered the cub, watching as it coughed violently, a tiny, fragile sound that seemed impossibly small against the lingering roar of the storm. Then an astonishing thing happened. The mother lion, her wet fur sleek against her powerful frame, approached, not with the snarling aggression he had expected, but with a powerful, almost reverent stillness. Her golden eyes, deep and knowing, met Jengo's for a long moment. Then, with an elegant, careful movement, she lifted her cub by the scruff of its neck, a silent acknowledgement of the life given back. Zola, watching from a short distance, let out an awestruck whisper. She, she trusts him. I've never seen anything like this. Her voice was laced with disbelief, a testament to how profoundly this moment defied all their training and experience. Kalo, ever practical, cut through the emotional reverence. Jengo, quickly, assess the cub's condition. Themba, Zola, let's start shaping that spillway. The island won't last much longer. He pointed to a section of the bank where the water could be diverted, a plan already forming in his mind. Jengo made a show of checking the cub, running his hands gently over its small frame, listening to its ragged breathing. But even as he reassured the little creature, his eyes darted back to the culvert's mouth, drawn by the unsettling image of the hidden metallic casing. He knew he had to confirm his suspicions. Feigning an inspection of the culvert's structural integrity, Jengo moved closer, his movements slow and deliberate. He knelt, ostensibly to examine the rusted rivets. With a furtive motion, using the edge of his utility knife, he discreetly scraped at the unnaturally smooth surface he'd touched earlier. A small, unusual metallic flake detached, almost imperceptibly, from the embedded casing. It had a faint, strange sheen to it, a subtle glow that seemed to absorb and reflect the dull light of the stormy afternoon, completely unlike the dull rust and mud. He quickly palmed it, pocketing the flake without anyone else noticing. A cold dread settled in his stomach. This wasn't just old infrastructure, a relic of some forgotten project. This was deliberate, hidden, and deeply unsettling. In another astonishing display, the mother lion, instead of retreating to the relative safety of higher ground, carefully carried her cub towards the new, calmer eddy that Themba and Zola were already beginning to shape. She settled her family there, within sight of the Rangers, her gaze still fixed on Jengo. The rest of the pride observing her slowly followed, maintaining a watchful but distinctly non-aggressive stance. Their collective presence was a silent, unnerving acknowledgement of the Rangers' efforts, an unspoken pact in the face of the overwhelming flood. Jengo finally looked up, catching Kalo's eye. Their glance was brief, loaded with unspoken understanding. Kalo's face was grim, a subtle tightening around his eyes telling Jengo that his team leader had witnessed his furtive actions at the culvert. He hadn't seen the flake, perhaps, but he had definitely noticed Jengo's unusual interest. He understood the implications of what Jengo might have found. No word to Zola or Themba yet, Kalo said, his voice low, barely audible above the dwindling rain. Loose lips, Jengo. This could be bigger than we know. The words were a warning, a confirmation of the chilling premonition that had settled over Jengo. The cub's rescue had opened a door to something far more dangerous than the floodwaters. With the cubs safe and the pride surprisingly calm, the Rangers worked with renewed urgency. Themba and Zola, their shoulders straining, deepened the spillway notch with shovels, redirecting the flood's fury away from the shrinking island. Kalo directed the maneuvers of a large, fallen acacia trunk, using the winch to guide it into position, creating a temporary barrier against the raging main current. Jengo, always observant, used the opportunity to meticulously scan the debris washed up around the culvert mouth. He moved slowly, deliberately, his boots squelching in the mud, his eyes sharp. Amidst the branches, refuse, and natural detritus, his fingers snagged on something out of place. A small, military-grade waterproof pouch, its dark material a stark contrast to the natural environment. It was clearly not Ranger issue, its professional design hinting at something far more advanced than typical poaching gear. He opened it, his heart quickening. Inside, nestled among a few grains of sand, was a discarded vial with a peculiar blue residue clinging to its inner walls. Beside it lay a miniaturized, broken tracking device, its casing shattered, but its intricate circuits still visible. It was unlike any he'd ever encountered, far too sophisticated for typical wildlife tracking. This changes everything, Jengo muttered under his breath, the words tasting like ash. The metallic flake in his pocket suddenly felt like a heavy stone. Kalo, who had been discreetly watching Jengo's focused search, approached, his expression somber. Found anything else, Jengo, beyond what the river carried? His tone was low, knowing. Jengo held out the pouch, revealing its unsettling contents. Kalo's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition mixed with anger in their depths. He picked up the vial, sniffing it cautiously. Biomarkers, he breathed, his voice tight. Then he examined the broken tracker. And a high-frequency device. This isn't just poaching, Jengo. This is organized. Professional. A ripple of unease spread through the air, but it wasn't just from their discovery. In the murky, calmer water downstream, a massive crocodile, its ancient, unblinking eyes like weathered coins, glided silently into view, drawn by the altered currents and the vulnerable cub. It was a predator in its element, sensing an easy meal. Suddenly, the male lion unleashed a thunderous roar. It wasn't the usual territorial warning. This was deeper, more resonant, a deliberate, almost protective declaration. Its immense sound reverberated through the savannah, aimed not just at the crocodile, but encompassing the working rangers. It was a clear, unambiguous challenge, a warning to the ancient reptile to keep its distance, protecting not just his pride, but also the humans. The entire pride responded, moving with a disciplined precision that sent shivers down Jengo's spine. They formed a crescent, their bodies strategically positioned to defend not only their own family, but also the humans who were now, unbelievably, part of their struggle. It was an instinctive, yet profoundly intelligent act. "They're guarding us, Jengo," Themba said quietly, his voice full of disbelief and wonder. "Like we're kin." Jengo and Kalo exchanged a profound look, a silent understanding passing between them. The lion's unprecedented intelligence, their continued proximity, their deliberate, defensive formation. It was a silent alliance. They understood. They knew the hidden danger, the human threat linked to the very things Jengo had found. Kalo pulled Jengo aside, his voice a low warning, almost a growl. "We keep this quiet, Jengo. The less our names are attached to this, the better. Our immediate priority is to get them safe, then we figure out who is doing this, and don't underestimate them." The them hung in the air, cold and heavy, a vast, unseen enemy looming far larger than any flood. You won't believe what happens next as the lines between human and wild blur, and our rangers stumble into a conspiracy far more dangerous than any flood. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and share this story with everyone, because the truth they're uncovering could shake the very foundations of what we thought we knew. The Rangers pressed on with their work, deepening the spillway notch, their every action now imbued with a double, terrifying purpose. They were not merely battling a natural disaster, they were unwittingly peeling back layers of deception, exposing a conspiracy that felt both ancient and horrifyingly current. Each shovel of mud, each strategically placed log, was a step closer to understanding the human hand that had left its indelible, sinister mark on the land. The savannah remained a tense tableau. The massive crocodile, driven away temporarily by the male lion's ferocious roar, now circled ominously in the deeper waters. The male, sensing the persistent threat, launched a powerful charge into the shallow water, an eruption of spray and raw power, scattering the lingering predator for good. His eyes fixed on the receding reptilian form, then swept back to the rangers, a silent message of protective vigilance. As if drawn by the unfolding drama, shadowy forms began to appear on the distant bank. Hyenas, their guttural cackles echoing across the water, circled warily, their gaunt frames silhouetted against the bruised sky. But they were kept at bay, not just by the male, but by the entire pride's unwavering, organized defense. The lions shifted, presenting a united front, their eyes darting between the lurking scavengers and the humans. A cohesive unit. Jengo and Kalo worked with a new, frantic intensity, their movements precise. The temporary fixes they were implementing to redirect the water, however, were inadvertently carving deeper channels around the culvert, revealing more and more of the strange embedded metallic structure. The shimmering, unnatural casing was no longer just a glimpse. It was a growing, undeniable presence beneath the earth, humming faintly with an unseen energy. "This old track we're using to redirect the water," Kalo muttered, his voice low and urgent, his eyes fixed on the steadily revealing metal. "It runs straight past the abandoned Project Chimera site. It was supposed to be a myth, Jengo. A ghost story." Jengo's blood ran cold. He remembered the chilling whispers from his academy days. a bioengineering facility rumored to exist deep within the forgotten corners of the reserve. Government cover-ups, unspeakable animal experiments. A knot of dread tightened in his stomach. The blue residue, the tracking device, the glowing flake, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. As the floodwaters, now successfully redirected, carved deeper channels around the culvert, even more of the strange metallic casing was exposed. It wasn't just a plate, it was a seamless, extensive network, an entire underground installation revealed by nature's fury. Suddenly, Zola, who had been scanning the horizon with binoculars, lowered them abruptly. "Sir," she said, her voice tight, "I think we have company. On that ridge, they're watching us." Jengo and Kalo followed her gaze. Distant figures, indistinct but undeniably human, stood silhouetted against the fading light. They were too disciplined for poachers, too still for locals. Kalo, ever the pragmatic leader, feigned nonchalance for Zola's benefit. "Just curious, passers-by, Zola. Focus on the flow, keep the water moving." But his eyes, grim and heavy, met Jengo's, a silent confirmation of their shared dread. They were being watched, and whoever they were interested in what the flood was exposing. The mother lion, now leading her cub across the newly stabilized path of calmer water, paused. She frequently scanned the distant ridge, her gaze mirroring the ranger's growing apprehension, a profound, almost human warning in her intense golden eyes. The pride's crossing was a testament to their deep, unprecedented trust, an almost choreographed procession across the water, their movements deliberate and united, moving towards a refuge that felt more like a shared battlefield. Kalo's voice dropped to a barely audible whisper, eyes still on the distant figures. "We keep this quiet, Jengo. No one else. The less our names are attached to this, the better. And don't underestimate them. They've had years to bury this secret, and they won't let us unearth it easily." The sun began its slow descent, painting the bruised sky with hues of bruised purple and burnt orange, as the lion pride successfully reached the higher, drier ground. Yet, they did not retreat into the familiar sanctuary of the bush. Instead, they remained visible, an unnerving sentinel presence, their forms silhouetted against the plains, facing both the receding flood and the rangers. The mother lion, her wet fur now glistening in the faint light, fixed her intelligent, unblinking gaze directly upon Jengo and Kalo. It was an acknowledgement that transcended mere animal gratitude. It was a profound, silent warning, a plea for understanding that resonated deep within Jengo's core. "They know, Jengo," Kalo said, his voice hushed, almost a whisper against the vast silence that had fallen after the storm. "They understand more than we can imagine. They're not just thankful for the cub." A chill ran down Jengo's spine, despite the relative calm. "They're warning us," he replied, his voice tight, as he subtly gestured first towards the culvert, then to the now empty ridge where the observers had stood. "About that, what's really buried here?" Driven by an invisible urgency, the rangers collected their tools, their movements hurried, efficient. The light was fading fast, and the feeling of being watched, though unseen, was palpable. As they packed up, Kalo made a quick, concise report on the satellite phone. "Safe move of the Pride to higher ground. All clear." He paused, then added a cryptic note, ensuring it wouldn't raise immediate alarms but would trigger the right people. "The old track needs a permanent spillway, and there's unusual metallic debris and biomarkers in the culvert area. Highly recommend investigation." As the truck pulled away, its engine a low rumble in the quiet evening, Jengo glanced back one last time. The Pride remained, silent watchers, their eyes like embers in the twilight. The shadowy observers from the ridge had vanished completely, leaving no trace but a heightened sense of menace. On the truck's tailgate, Kalo updated his logbook, his hand pressing hard against the page. Pride remained visible, gaze held. No fear, no aggression, entity made of stillness, a profound, unexplained intelligence. He hesitated, the pen hovering for a long moment, then added in a barely legible hand, as if worried his own words would be understood by unintended eyes. "Unidentified biomarkers confirmed near Project Chimera culvert. Suspect connection to documented animal intelligence anomalies. Cover-up likely." Jengo, reading over his shoulder, felt the full weight of the discovery. Project Chimera. They experimented on animals, genetically enhanced them. His voice was barely a whisper. Kalo nodded, his face grim, illuminated by the dashboard light. It seems the flood didn't just expose a cub, Jengo. It exposed a truth. The lions didn't just survive the water. They survived something else. And now, so have we. This isn't over. The Rangers drove into the receding storm, leaving the transformed savannah behind. Their rescue mission had stumbled upon a profound, horrifying conspiracy. The lions, far behind, stood like ancient guardians in the encroaching darkness, their unprecedented intelligence a silent, unsettling testament to humanity's forbidden reach, and a chilling promise of a future conflict that had just begun. The deluge, a week-long unspooling from the horizon, had transformed the familiar plains, forcing ancient riverbeds to remember their direction and revealing secrets meant to stay buried. Jengo's act of compassion, hauling a tiny cub from the churning Covert, had unwittingly become the first pebble thrown into a conspiracy far deeper than the floodwaters. The unnatural sheen, the strange symbols, the military-grade pouch with biomarkers and a high-frequency tracker, these weren't accidents of nature. They were deliberate imprints of Project Chimera, a chilling whisper from a past of forbidden bioengineering and animal experimentation. The most profound revelation, however, came from the lions themselves. Their unprecedented intelligence, the mother lion's unblinking, knowing gaze, the male's protective roar against predators that extended to the human rangers, the entire pride's organized defense and silent alliance. It all spoke of an awareness that transcended instinct. These lions weren't just victims, they were witnesses, perhaps even subjects of humanity's darkest endeavors. As the Ranger truck drove away, leaving the watchful pride silhouetted against the clearing sky, Jengo and Kaelo carried not just the weight of their discovery, but the chilling realization that their world, and the wild it contained, was forever changed. The flood had flexed its muscle, exposing a truth that would now demand answers.